Laura adjusted her scarf as she pushed her cart through the grocery store aisles, her senses absorbing the routine sounds around her. The hum of fluorescent lights, the steady murmur of conversations, the rhythmic beeping of scanners. Her return to this small town had been a quiet one, an attempt to find solace after a turbulent few years. Familiar faces greeted her, though they were cautious, as if sensing the invisible weight Laura carried. Turning a corner, she nearly collided with a little girl. The child looked up, her eyes wide, cheeks flushed from excitement. Laura was about to apologize when the girl's face lit up with a smile. "Mom," the girl said, her voice so soft that Laura wondered if she'd imagined it. Shock rippled through her. She looked closer, noticing the girl's strikingly familiar eyes, a warm brown that seemed almost identical to her own. Her heart raced, and confusion clouded her mind. "No, honey, I'm not," she began, but the girl was already clinging to her hand. "There you are, Grace." A man's voice cut through the moment. Laura turned to see him walking over, his expression mixed with relief and something else, recognition. He was tall, with tired eyes and a gentle manner, though he kept his gaze fixed on Laura with an intensity that made her shift uncomfortably. "Sorry, she must have confused you with her." "Well, with someone," he said, gently pulling the girl away. "I'm Sam. Grace here has quite the imagination." Laura tried to laugh it off, but something in Sam's eyes unsettled her. He looked at her almost too long, as if trying to place her in a memory he couldn't quite recall. Grace tugged at his sleeve, and he turned, but Laura could feel his gaze linger. "Nice meeting you, Laura," he said, surprising her with her name. Had she known him before? She forced a smile, muttering a polite farewell, but as she walked away, her mind spun. It felt as though a door she'd closed long ago had cracked open. Laura couldn't shake the encounter with Sam and Grace. The little girl's face, her calling Laura Mom so innocently, it had left a haunting echo in her mind. That night, as she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, fragments of memory surfaced, each one like a stray thread tugging at her heart. Had she seen Sam before? Could Grace's familiarity be more than just an illusion? The next day, Laura met her friend and at the cafe, hoping to shake off the unsettling encounter. But as she sipped her coffee, she found herself asking questions about newcomers in town. "Oh, that's Sam Hastings," and said, looking surprised by Laura's sudden interest. "He moved here a few months back with his daughter, Grace. Lost his wife a while ago, I think. He's a private guy, doesn't talk much about it." Laura felt a pang of sympathy, but pushed on. "Do you know much about his wife?" And shook her head. "Not really. He doesn't mention her, and people respect his privacy. It's just him and Grace now." Why the curiosity? Laura hesitated, unwilling to share the entire story with, and yet, instead, she shrugged. "No reason. I just thought I recognized him." For the next few days, Laura's curiosity grew. She tried to focus on work, on building her life in the town again, but her thoughts constantly returned to Grace's innocent question and Sam's eyes, which held the same confusion she felt. Finally, she saw them again at the town's weekend market. Sam waved in recognition, and Laura took a deep breath, walking over. "Laura, right?" he said, smiling in a way that felt both familiar and distant. "Yes, and Grace, hello," Laura replied warmly, feeling an unexpected fondness for the child. Grace hugged her leg, and Laura felt a surge of warmth she hadn't expected. Sam seemed to watch her carefully, studying her. "It's good to see Grace connecting with someone," he admitted quietly, his tone almost wistful. Laura paused, unsure of what to say. "She's a lovely child." Their conversation lingered as they wandered around the market together, their casual words hiding layers of unspoken questions. Laura left that day with a growing feeling that the connection between them was no coincidence. There was more here. She just didn't know what. The following weekend, Laura decided to visit the local park, a familiar place where she often went to clear her mind. She hadn't planned on running into Sam and Grace, but as she walked past the playground, there they were. Grace spotted her first and dashed over with a joyful shout, her face lighting up as she called Laura's name. Laura, look, I can swing by myself. Grace squealed, her little legs pumping as she swung higher and higher. Sam, who had been standing nearby, gave Laura a friendly wave. Looks like you've made quite an impression, he said, his voice warm, but his gaze still carrying that slight wariness. Laura smiled, watching Grace with a fondness she didn't entirely understand. She's a bright one, she replied. She reminds me of someone. Sam's expression softened, and he looked down, brushing some invisible dust from his jacket. Grace. She's had a hard time since her mother passed. Doesn't open up easily. You're one of the few people she's taken to so quickly. There was a vulnerability in his words that Laura hadn't expected. She felt a pull toward him, a need to learn more about the woman Grace had lost, though she wasn't sure why it mattered so much to her. The child's innocent connection had sparked something she couldn't ignore. They spent the afternoon chatting, watching Grace play, and strolling around the park. Laura shared small snippets of her life, careful not to reveal too much, while Sam remained guarded about his past. But as the day went on, their barriers began to crumble, and Laura felt the beginnings of a fragile bond forming. Later, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Sam and Grace prepared to leave. Sam looked at Laura with a hesitant smile. Maybe we could do this again sometime. Laura's heart skipped a beat, and she nodded, feeling a thrill of anticipation mixed with an inexplicable sense of familiarity. I'd like that. As they parted ways, she knew this connection was more than just coincidence. Somehow, meeting Sam and Grace felt like a piece of her past had reappeared, waiting to be unraveled. Over the next few weeks, Laura and Sam met frequently. They would often bring Grace to the park, where Laura found herself drawn into their lives, savoring the warmth and joy of simple moments with them. Grace would chatter on about school and her favorite toys, her trust in Laura deepening with each meeting. Sam, too, seemed to grow more comfortable, sharing small anecdotes and details about his life. One afternoon, as they were walking through the park, Grace tugged at Laura's hand, asking for a story. Sam encouraged her, smiling as Grace's eyes sparkled with excitement. Laura hesitated, then began telling a story from her own childhood about a little girl who loved adventures. She spoke softly, weaving the tale from memories that felt like whispers from another life. As she told it, Sam listened intently, and Laura felt as though they were sharing more than just words. There was a thread of recognition in Sam's gaze that made her wonder if he, too, sensed something familiar in her. Once the story was over, Grace hugged her, eyes gleaming with delight. "You tell the best stories," she exclaimed. Sam chuckled, a quiet laugh that warmed Laura's heart. "You really have a way with her. It's almost like you were meant to know each other." Laura smiled, but her mind buzzed with questions. Later, as she returned home, she found herself examining old photographs, searching for answers that felt just out of reach. There was a familiarity in Grace's features, her smile, even her mannerisms, that stirred something deep within her. Laura couldn't shake the feeling that her connection with Grace was no accident. The pieces didn't quite fit yet, but she was certain there was a reason she felt so drawn to this family. There was more to uncover. She was sure of it. And as much as she tried to resist, she knew that she couldn't walk away. Laura's curiosity soon turned into an obsession she couldn't ignore. After her time with Sam and Grace at the park, memories from her past kept resurfacing, fragments she couldn't quite put together, but that felt undeniably connected to this small family. She knew that dwelling on it might hurt her, might reopen wounds she'd tried hard to heal. Yet, a persistent voice in her head urged her to uncover the truth. She decided to do some research on Sam's late wife, hoping to piece together this puzzle. Carefully, she approached an old friend, Sarah, someone she trusted to keep things discreet. Meeting for coffee, she tried to approach the topic casually, but her friend quickly caught on to the serious undertone in her questions. "What's got you so interested in Sam Hastings?" Sarah asked, raising an eyebrow. "I didn't think you even knew him before he moved here." "I didn't, not really," Laura replied, trying to sound nonchalant. But something about Grace. I don't know. She seems familiar to me, like a distant memory. I feel this connection, and it's hard to explain. Sarah regarded her thoughtfully, sipping her coffee. Well, I don't know much about his wife, but I think she had a few ties to the town years ago. They say she was a quiet woman, and she didn't have many friends here. But her family, they had their own secrets. Laura leaned forward, intrigued. What kind of secrets? Sarah shook her head. Nothing specific I can remember. Just they weren't as close-knit as most families here. And she left the town years ago, move away, maybe to escape something. It was strange, though. She was always a bit mysterious. As Laura listened, she felt a rush of both relief and unease. This woman, Sam's late wife, felt like a shadow from her own past. She thanked Sarah, her mind buzzing with even more questions. Returning home, she couldn't stop thinking about her suspicions. How could she have a connection with someone she barely knew, with a little girl who resembled her in inexplicable ways? There were too many coincidences to ignore, yet no concrete answers in sight. Laura decided she'd have to dig deeper, knowing that the path ahead was filled with uncertainty. Days later, Laura found herself at the park once more, waiting nervously for Sam and Grace. She decided to confront Sam, gently, and see if he'd be willing to share more about his wife. It was risky, but the weight of her suspicions had grown too heavy to carry alone. When they arrived, Laura noticed that Sam's usual guarded demeanor seemed slightly softer. They exchanged pleasantries, and soon Grace was off playing, leaving Laura and Sam sitting quietly on a bench. After a few moments of silence, Laura spoke, choosing her words carefully. "Sam, I wanted to ask you something about Grace's mother," she began, watching his reaction closely. She could see a flicker of emotion cross his face, but he remained silent. "I don't mean to pry," she continued gently, "but I feel this strange connection with her. It's hard to explain, and it made me wonder, did we ever meet? Did she ever mention someone like me?" Sam looked down, his fingers fidgeting with his wedding band. "She didn't talk much about her past," he admitted. "She was a private person, even with me. I always respected that, though it left parts of her a mystery, even to me." Laura nodded, a pang of disappointment and guilt washing over her. "I understand. I don't know how to explain it, but I feel like I'm connected to her somehow. And to Grace. I don't know why." Sam's expression softened. "You know, you're not the only one who's felt that way. Grace, she's mentioned things too. Little comments that make me think. She remembers more than she lets on, even at her age." Laura's heart skipped a beat. Could Grace truly be carrying memories of her mother's past? Memories that somehow linked Laura to a life she'd only glimpsed from the outside? "Laura," Sam continued, "I don't have answers, but I feel like meeting you is no accident." His words hung in the air, both comforting and deeply unsettling. Laura felt that she was on the brink of discovering something life-altering, but her fear held her back from pushing further. They left the park with questions unsaid and mysteries unsolved, yet Laura felt more compelled than ever to uncover the secrets that connected them. She knew that the answers wouldn't come easily, but her heart told her she was closer to the truth than she'd ever been. Laura couldn't ignore her intuition any longer. She decided to confront her past directly, hoping to uncover more about the connections that seemed to link her, Sam, and Grace. One evening, she searched through an old box of photos and letters she'd kept stored away, mementos from a different time. She sifted through faded pictures and forgotten letters, her hands trembling as she unearthed memories she hadn't dared revisit. Among the photos, one image caught her attention, a group picture taken years ago at a town event. She recognized herself immediately, standing with friends. But in the background, barely noticeable, was a young woman who looked strikingly familiar. It was a younger version of the woman she heard described as Sam's late wife. Her heart pounded as she studied the photo, the woman's face triggering a flood of memories. She had known her, albeit briefly. They'd crossed paths once in a social gathering, shared only a few words. Yet the encounter had stayed with Laura, a distant but indelible memory. They'd connected in a way that was hard to explain, a fleeting sense of kinship that Laura now realized might have held more significance. Armed with this knowledge, Laura felt a renewed sense of urgency. She met with Sam later that week, holding the photo tightly in her hand, debating whether to show him. When they finally sat together in a quiet corner of the town's library, Laura took a deep breath and handed the photo to him. I knew her, Laura said softly. We met a long time ago, just once, but I remember her. Sam's face went pale as he stared at the photo. He looked at Laura, a mix of shock and recognition flashing in his eyes. I had no idea, he murmured. She never mentioned you. But maybe there was a reason. She always said there were parts of her past she couldn't share. The revelation left them both stunned, the weight of it pressing down on their conversation. They parted with an unspoken understanding that this connection, however mysterious, was real. And it was only a matter of time before more pieces would fall into place. Laura returned home with a whirlwind of emotions. She couldn't decide if she felt closer to closure or even more entangled in the web of her past. Determined to get answers, she called her parents, hoping they could shed light on the history she'd uncovered. Her mother's voice was warm and familiar as they talked, but when Laura brought up Sam's wife, there was a sudden pause. A tension Laura hadn't expected filled the silence. "Mom, did you know her?" she pressed, sensing that her mother might hold the key to unlocking the rest of the story. Her mother sighed, her voice tinged with reluctance. "Yes, Laura. We knew her. Briefly. She came from a family with a lot of secrets. We didn't want to get involved, and we thought it would be best if you didn't either. I'm sorry we kept it from you, but it was for your own good." The explanation left Laura reeling. Her own family had known about this connection and chosen to hide it, believing it would protect her. It was as though they tried to erase the past to keep her safe, but in doing so, they had left her with a painful gap in her memory. Now, she felt the ache of betrayal, of time lost and stories left untold. That night, Laura lay awake, grappling with anger and confusion. Her family's attempts to protect her had only deepened the mystery and left her feeling as though she'd been deprived of answers that might have brought her peace. The next morning, she met with Sam, feeling compelled to be honest about everything she'd learned. She confessed her family's connection to his wife's past, hoping he'd understand why she hadn't come forward sooner. Sam listened quietly, his expression hardening as she spoke. "So you've known all this time?" he asked, his voice a mixture of hurt and disbelief. Laura shook her head, trying to explain. "I didn't know, Sam. My family, they tried to keep it from me. I only found out recently. Please, believe me." But Sam's guarded expression remained. "I don't know what to believe," he said finally, his tone resigned. "Maybe it would be best if we didn't keep reopening these old wounds." His words stung, but Laura understood. She'd crossed boundaries she hadn't meant to, her need for answers inadvertently causing him pain. As he walked away, she felt the weight of her family's secrets settle heavily on her, deepening the distance between her and the life she'd tried to rebuild. Days passed, and Laura found herself struggling with the fallout of her conversation with Sam. The encounter had left her feeling more lost than ever, as if she'd torn open old wounds she couldn't heal. The town's small social circles were buzzing with whispers, her friends now wary, sensing a change in her. Unable to bear the isolation, Laura turned to her close friend Anne for support. Over coffee, she poured out her frustration, explaining her desire to connect with Sam and Grace and the tangled web of secrets that seemed to prevent it, and listened patiently, offering comfort but caution as well. "Laura, maybe this is the universe's way of telling you to let go of the past," and suggested gently. "Not every mystery needs solving. Sometimes we need to move forward, even when it feels unfinished." Laura considered Anne's words, but felt an undeniable pull to find closure. I feel like I'm connected to them in ways I can't explain. Maybe I can't just let it go." And nodded, understanding, but not fully agreeing. "If you think you need to keep searching, I won't stop you. Just remember, Not everyone will understand your journey. As the conversation ended, Laura realized that her choices were affecting more than just herself. She felt like an outsider again, struggling to find a balance between her need for answers and the impact of her actions on those around her. In her pursuit of closure, she risked alienating the people she cared about. Determined but aware of the consequences, Laura resolved to continue her search for answers. She would tread carefully, mindful of those around her, but she knew she couldn't walk away. Not yet. Driven by her need for resolution, Laura reached out to Sam one last time. She hoped to make amends, to help him understand that she wasn't there to disrupt his life, but to honor the connection she felt. She invited him to meet her at a quiet cafe on the edge of town, unsure if he would come. When Sam arrived, his guarded expression told her that he hadn't come to reconcile. Still, Laura pressed on, explaining her intentions and sharing her memories of his late wife. She opened up about the family secrets she'd discovered, her own sense of betrayal, and the inexplicable bond she felt with Grace. But Sam's eyes held a mix of anger and disappointment. "I don't understand why you're doing this, Laura," he said, his voice tight with emotion. "We were fine, Grace and I. We didn't need this. I don't need someone dredging up my wife's past." Laura felt her throat tighten, realizing the depth of the hurt she'd caused. "I'm sorry, Sam. I never meant to hurt you or Grace. I couldn't walk away without understanding." Sam shook his head, his expression pained. "Maybe you should have. This isn't something we needed. And maybe you're just not someone we need in our lives." His words cut deep, a rejection that left her feeling hollow and defeated. She'd pursued the truth at the cost of her connection to Sam and Grace, and now it seemed she'd lost them entirely. As he left the cafe, Laura was left alone, grappling with the consequences of her choices. She had searched for answers, hoping they would bring her closer to peace, but all she felt now was regret. She'd reached her lowest point, realizing that her journey for closure might have cost her the one chance she had to build something new. In the weeks following her last conversation with Sam, Laura felt the full impact of her actions within the small town. Whispers followed her everywhere, from the grocery store to the post office. Friends and acquaintances she'd once confided in seemed distant now, offering only polite smiles or sidelong glances. The town had always thrived on stories, and now Laura was the center of one that she never wanted to be part of. To distract herself, Laura threw herself into work and avoided public places as much as possible. Still, the isolation weighed on her, and even Anne, her closest friend, was urging her to move forward and let go. But the scars of her past and the regret of losing Sam and Grace haunted her nights, making each day feel heavier than the last. One afternoon, while walking through town, Laura overheard a group of women talking about her. She paused, rooted in place, unable to turn away. She should have left them alone, one whispered. Some people don't know when to mind their own business. I heard she was prying into Sam's wife's past, even digging up old photos. It's unsettling, another added, shaking her head. Laura's chest tightened. She quickly turned and walked away, her face flushed with embarrassment and anger. She hadn't realized the full extent of how far her story had spread, or how it had cast her as an outsider. Her attempts to find a place within this town felt futile now, and for the first time since returning, she wondered if she truly belonged here. But as she passed the park where she had once shared so many joyful afternoons with Sam and Grace, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was still something left for her here, a purpose she hadn't yet discovered. Despite the whispers and the isolation, she resolved to find her own way forward, even if it meant doing it alone. Just when Laura had resigned herself to her new solitary existence, something unexpected happened. One evening, she received a small note left at her door. The handwriting was simple, the message brief. "Meet me at the park tomorrow, for PM. Sam." Laura's heart raced as she read it. She could hardly believe Sam was reaching out after everything that had happened. She spent the night wondering if this was an olive branch, or if he merely wanted to settle things once and for all. Still, she couldn't ignore the spark of hope that flickered inside her. The next afternoon, she arrived at the park early, nerves twisting in her stomach. Sam was already there, seated on the same bench they'd shared so many times before. His expression was unreadable, his eyes distant. She took a deep breath and approached him. For a moment, they sat in silence, both hesitant to speak. Finally, Sam broke the quiet. "Grace has been asking about you," he said, his voice soft but edged with emotion. "She doesn't understand why you aren't around anymore." Laura's heart ached, but she kept her voice steady. "I'm sorry, Sam. I never meant to cause you or Grace any pain." Sam looked at her, his expression softening. "I know you didn't. I've had time to think, and maybe I judged you too harshly. You were just trying to understand something that's been part of your life, too." Laura felt a wave of relief wash over her. "I still don't have all the answers, but I don't need them to know that you and Grace mean a lot to me." They continued talking, carefully at first, then more openly as they shared their fears, regrets, and hopes. Sam admitted that his initial anger had stemmed from his own pain, his own fears of reopening wounds he thought had healed. But seeing how much Grace missed Laura, he'd realized that perhaps keeping her at a distance had only deepened the loss. As they walked through the park, the beginnings of trust and forgiveness took root. Sam reached out and gently touched her hand, a simple gesture that carried the promise of a second chance. Laura's heart lifted as she felt the weight of isolation and regret begin to ease. That day, as they left the park together, Laura felt a glimmer of hope that perhaps their connection could be rebuilt, stronger and more resilient. She was no longer alone, and she knew that her journey toward closure and connection wasn't over yet. Over the following weeks, Laura and Sam began to rebuild their friendship, this time with honesty and understanding. They kept things simple, often meeting at the park or going for coffee, allowing their relationship to grow naturally. Grace was thrilled to see Laura again, running to her with open arms each time, her innocent joy a balm for Laura's lingering uncertainties. One Saturday afternoon, Sam invited Laura to his home for the first time. Nervous but excited, Laura arrived with a small gift for Grace, a storybook they'd talked about during their park visits. Grace immediately pulled her to the living room, insisting that Laura read it to her. As Laura read, she felt a warmth settle over her, as if she'd finally found a place where she belonged. Later, as Grace played nearby, Laura and Sam shared a quiet moment over coffee. Sam opened up about his wife, sharing details of their life together, how they'd met, the dreams they'd shared, and the struggles they'd faced. He spoke with a tenderness that revealed both the depth of his love and the pain of his loss, allowing Laura a glimpse into the life he'd once had. Laura listened intently, her heart swelling with empathy and admiration. She understood now why he had been so protective of Grace and their life together. She felt honored that he trusted her enough to share these parts of himself and realized that she, too, could let down her guard. She told him about her own past, her mistakes, her fears, and the reasons she'd returned to town, seeking something she hadn't been able to name until now. As the afternoon faded into evening, they shared their vulnerabilities and hopes for the future, the connection between them growing deeper with each word. For the first time in a long time, Laura felt a genuine sense of peace. As she left that evening, she couldn't help but smile. She knew this was the beginning of something real, something built on trust and mutual respect. And for the first time since her return, she felt like she was moving forward instead of looking back. With each passing day, Laura, Sam, and Grace's bond deepened. They began spending more time together, and it soon became apparent to everyone in town that they were building a life as a family, though unofficially. This change didn't go unnoticed, but Laura had long since stopped caring about the gossip. What mattered was the happiness she felt whenever she was with them. One evening, Sam invited Laura to a quiet dinner, just the two of them. As they sat together, he surprised her with a heartfelt confession. "I didn't think I'd ever feel this way again," he said softly, reaching for her hand. "After losing her, I thought that part of me was gone." Laura's eyes softened, and she held his hand gently. "I don't want to replace her, Sam. I I want to be here for you and Grace, however you need me. Sam nodded, a smile touching his lips. You already are. Their connection deepened with that shared vulnerability, and they began discussing their hopes for a future together. They spoke of the possibility of a new life, a fresh start filled with love, healing, and shared dreams. For Laura, the pain of her past had finally begun to lift, replaced by a sense of purpose and belonging she hadn't known she was capable of feeling. But as they talked, Laura sensed that Sam was holding back, still haunted by memories he couldn't fully share. She decided not to push him, trusting that with time, he would open up completely. They had come so far, and she knew that trust would continue to be the foundation of whatever future they built together. One weekend, while Grace played nearby, Laura and Sam talked openly about their relationship, agreeing to take things slowly for Grace's sake. But the understanding was there. They were committed to one another and to creating a stable, loving environment for Grace. It was no longer a question of if, but of when they would become a family. Laura felt as though she was healing alongside Sam and Grace, each of them helping the other mend old wounds. She had come to the town seeking closure, but what she'd found was far more precious, a chance to build something new and lasting. As the months passed, Laura, Sam, and Grace continued to grow as a family. They celebrated birthdays together, attended local events, and created routines that felt like the beginnings of a real home. Grace, full of joy and innocence, brought out the best in both Laura and Sam, her laughter and spirit a reminder of the love they all shared. One sunny afternoon, Laura and Sam took Grace to the lake, a popular spot where families gathered to picnic and play. As they settled on a blanket, Grace darted off to play with other children, her laughter echoing across the water. Laura watched her, feeling a profound sense of contentment. Sitting beside her, Sam turned to Laura, his expression thoughtful. I never imagined we'd be here, he said softly. After everything, I thought Grace and I would be on our own forever. Laura took his hand, her voice filled with quiet confidence. You and Grace are part of me now. I want to be here for both of you, whatever that means. Sam squeezed her hand, his eyes warm and hopeful. I feel the same. I know it won't always be easy, but I'm ready to start fresh with you. They shared a moment of quiet understanding, their future unfolding before them. It was clear that what they had was real, something worth protecting and nurturing. They had all been through their own struggles, but together, they felt stronger. As they watched Grace play, Laura's heart swelled with a deep sense of gratitude. She'd come to the town looking for closure, but had found a second chance instead. Her path had been far from simple, but she knew now that every step had led her here, to this family and this moment. That day marked the start of a new chapter, one filled with the promise of love, trust, and healing. They had finally found their way to each other, and there was nothing more that Laura could ask for. Despite the joy they shared, Laura knew that there was one final step she had to take before fully embracing her future with Sam and Grace. A lingering tension gnawed at her, a need to confront the pain of her past head-on, to fully let go and start anew. One evening, as they sat together, Laura looked at Sam and took a deep breath. There's something I need to do before we can move forward, she said quietly. I need to visit my family and confront the past I left behind. Sam nodded, his expression supportive. Whatever you need, Laura. I'll be here when you're ready. Laura arranged to visit her parents that weekend, and as she prepared for the journey, she felt a mixture of dread and anticipation. She hadn't fully dealt with the emotions that had surfaced during her search for answers, and she knew that facing her family was the final step toward true healing. When she arrived, her parents welcomed her warmly, though she could see a hint of apprehension in their eyes. Over dinner, she began to open up about the secrets she'd uncovered, her relationship with Sam, and her desire to move forward without the weight of past mysteries holding her back. Her mother listened quietly before reaching out to hold Laura's hand. We only wanted to protect you, she said softly. We thought that hiding the past would keep you safe, but we realize now that it was a mistake. Laura's father nodded in agreement. "We're sorry for the pain our choices caused you. You deserve to live your life fully, without being haunted by what could have been." Their words brought Laura a sense of closure she hadn't expected. The final wall between her and her future had crumbled, leaving her with a clear path ahead. She knew she could finally let go of the past and embrace the life she was building with Sam and Grace. When she returned to town, she felt lighter, free from the shadows that had once loomed over her. She went straight to Sam's house, and as he opened the door, she knew he could see the peace in her eyes. "I'm ready," she whispered, her voice filled with certainty. "I'm ready to start our life together." With her past finally behind her, Laura felt a renewed sense of purpose as she embraced her future with Sam and Grace. They decided to hold a small gathering at Sam's house to celebrate their new beginning. Close friends and a few of Sam's family members gathered, filling the house with warmth and laughter that echoed through the rooms. Grace, wearing a bright dress Laura had bought her, ran around the yard, showing off a bouquet of flowers she'd picked herself. Watching her, Laura felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. This little girl, so full of life and love, was now an inseparable part of her heart. She and Sam exchanged a smile, a silent acknowledgement of the journey that had brought them here. During the evening, Laura's friend pulled her aside, smiling with genuine happiness. "I've never seen you so at peace, Laura," she said softly. "It's like you finally found where you belong." Laura nodded, her eyes misting over. "I feel like I have. I spent so long looking for answers, trying to fix the past, but all I needed was to look forward," and squeezed her hand, and Laura felt a profound sense of fulfillment, knowing that the people who mattered most supported her journey. As the night wound down, Sam brought out a small box he'd kept hidden. He handed it to Laura, his eyes warm and filled with emotion. Opening it, Laura found a delicate silver bracelet, engraved with a single word: home. "I wanted you to know," Sam said quietly, "that you and Grace are my family now. I want us to build a life together, with no secrets and no regrets." Laura's heart swelled as she slipped on the bracelet, feeling its weight as a symbol of her new beginning. She and Sam shared a kiss, their future solidified in that simple gesture, surrounded by the warmth of friends and family who had supported them through everything. As Laura looked around, taking in the faces of those she loved, she knew that her journey had led her exactly where she was meant to be. Her search for closure had transformed into a path toward love, family, and a future full of promise. A year later, Laura, Sam, and Grace stood on the front porch of their new home, gazing out at the town they had come to love. They'd chosen a cozy house on the outskirts, with a garden where Grace could play and grow. It was their sanctuary, a place where they could continue building memories and embrace the life they'd started together. Grace tugged on Laura's hand, pointing toward the garden. "Can we plant flowers, Mommy?" she asked, her eyes full of excitement. Laura smiled, her heart swelling at the name Grace had started calling her. "Of course, sweetheart. Let's make this place beautiful." As they worked together, Laura felt the fullness of everything she hoped for, a life built on trust, love, and new beginnings. She'd found her family, her peace, and her home. And as she knelt beside Sam and Grace, her heart knew there was no place she'd rather be.